Hey guys, tonight we are slipping quietly into a world of gold, incense and the slow hum of ancient rituals, a time when one person was worshipped like a god but lived more like a prisoner. Imagine waking up each morning in a palace so enormous it echoes with your own footsteps, where even silence feels heavy with ceremony. You are the ruler of everything the sun touches, yet you cannot decide when to open your own eyes. Servants hover at the edge of your bed, waiting for the first flicker of movement. The moment you blink, the routine begins. A chorus of soft voices, trays of scented oils and linen robes folded in perfect symmetry. It should feel powerful, but it does not. The air smells of honey and stone, and you can almost taste the dust of eternity. You stretch, though not too far, because a dozen attendants will panic if your royal elbow touches the wrong pillow. Someone hums a hymn written for your ancestors centuries ago, the same melody that plays every morning like a celestial alarm clock. You cannot snooze. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you are listening from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far these late-night journeys travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. You rise slowly, your bare feet touching the cool stone floor, and servants rush forward to place golden sandals on your toes. You think about refusing, just once, just to see what would happen, but the silence that would follow feels heavier than rebellion itself. The corridors outside your chamber glow with torchlight, their walls painted with stories of your supposed divinity. The murals show you smiting enemies you never met and making offerings to gods you secretly suspect have better things to do. The irony makes you smirk, but no one sees it. They are all too busy bowing. Somewhere deep in the palace, musicians are already tuning flutes for your morning procession. It is less a walk and more a performance, a living reminder to everyone that you are closer to heaven than they are. You step forward, your reflection rippling in polished copper mirrors as attendants sprinkle lotus petals along your path. The scent is dizzying, sweet but cloying, like a perfume bottle that never empties. You pass a courtyard where the first light of dawn hits the sandstone columns, and for a moment the entire world seems still. You could almost believe the stories, that you are eternal, untouchable, born from starlight itself. Almost. Then you hear the shuffle of feet behind you, the quiet whispers of advisors reminding you of ceremonies, taxes, and prayers to attend. The illusion fades like mist over the Nile. Power, you realize, is a kind of performance too, beautiful from the outside but exhausting to maintain. Historians still wonder if any pharaoh ever truly felt divine, or if they simply learned to wear the mask better each day. You smile faintly at the thought, and your priest mistakes it for enlightenment. The gods favor you, he says. You do not correct him. After all, even a god needs good public relations. You walk deeper into the palace as the sun climbs above the horizon, its light filtering through tall alabaster windows that scatter gold across the floor like spilled treasure. And every servant within sight lowers their gaze as though direct eye contact might cause the sky to crack. You are a living symbol, after all, though the title feels more like a costume each passing day. The morning ritual begins in the temple wing, a place so quiet it hums, filled with the soft hiss of burning oil and the scent of myrrh rising in slow spirals that paint the air with invisible lines. A high priest greets you with a bow so deep you wonder if he practices in front of a mirror. And when he speaks, it is not to you, but to the gods he claims can hear every word. You stand there, draped in linen that rustles like reeds, holding a scepter carved from cedar wood, brought all the way from a land whose name you can never remember. The priests begin to chant your many titles, their voices echoing against the stone walls, each one layering upon the next, until the sound feels less like praise and more like pressure. Somewhere between Lord of the Two Lands and Son of Ra, your mind drifts toward breakfast. Even divine beings get hungry, though no one dares mention it. You feel the warmth of sunlight on your face, and for a brief second, you allow yourself to imagine being outside, not as a ruler but as a person, barefoot on the cool riverbank, skipping stones across the Nile without ceremony or spectators. The thought makes you smile, which the priests mistake for divine approval, and they redouble their chanting. A young acolyte steps forward with a bowl of sacred water, holding it as if it contains the secrets of the universe, and you are required to dip your fingers into it 3 times, raise your hand and touch your forehead. It is meant to symbolize purity, but all you can think of is how chilly the water feels in the morning. Historians later debate whether these rituals were truly spiritual or simply theatrical. You, however, have long suspected that the gods probably stopped attending their own ceremonies centuries ago. Still, the priests look so sincere that you hesitate to ruin their enthusiasm. Behind them, musicians play soft harp notes meant to soothe the divine spirit, though the melody sounds suspiciously like yesterday's. You cannot help but chuckle softly, a sound so unexpected that 2 servants nearly drop the tray of incense they are carrying. "A good omen," the priest declares quickly, desperate to frame your humor as holiness. You nod graciously because correcting him would take too much energy, and the day has barely begun. The final part of the ritual involves standing perfectly still, while attendants polish your gold jewelry until it gleams blindingly bright. The weight of the collar presses into your shoulders, a reminder that even beauty can bruise. When the last prayer fades into silence, you exhale quietly, though not too loudly. It would not do for a god to sound relieved. You turn toward the grand doorway leading back into the palace, where sunlight spills across the threshold, like a promise of freedom you are not allowed to take. You step through it anyway, because even small rebellions count when you live inside a legend. You return from the temple with the faint scent of incense still clinging to your linen, and before you can breathe freely, another ritual begins, one disguised as a meal, though it feels more like a meeting in disguise for breakfast in your palace, is not about food, but about control. The long table before you glitters with polished bronze and dishes that would make a merchant faint from envy. Figs glazed with honey bread baked with sesame dates arranged in perfect symmetry, and a jug of pomegranate juice chilled overnight by servants who have not slept since sunset. You sit at the center naturally, but the seat is less a throne and more a spotlight. To your left sits the vizier, whose smile never quite reaches his eyes, and to your right the high priest who occasionally mutters blessings that sound suspiciously like commentary. They speak of harvests, river levels, and taxation as if you have the power to make the Nile rise on command, and every nod you give becomes royal policy. Somewhere between the figs and the honey, you realize no one at the table has actually asked what you want to eat. Instead, every course is chosen for symbolism: fish for abundance, bread for stability, wine for divine favor, though you secretly wish for something less poetic and more edible. Historians later write that pharaohs dined like gods, but they rarely mention that most of the time, those gods were bored. Across the hall, servants glide silently with the precision of starlings, and one misstep could mean a week of punishment. You watch the tension ripple through them like an invisible thread. You reach for a cluster of grapes, and instantly, 2 attendants step forward to peel them, an act that was once considered luxury, but now just feels absurd. You resist the urge to tell them to sit down and eat too, but you know the suggestion would travel through the palace faster than a sandstorm. As you chew politely, your vizier begins reciting a report about new monuments being planned in your honor, which sounds flattering until you remember how many workers it will require and how many days of heat they will endure. You nod again, pretending to listen, and trace the rim of your cup as if it contains the map of your kingdom. The priest interrupts with a theory that the gods sent a sign last night through a flicker in the temple flame. Perhaps they were cold, you say before thinking, and the entire table freezes. Then, to your relief, the priest laughs nervously, mistaking your sarcasm for divine wit. "A clever interpretation, Majesty," he says, his voice thin as papyrus. The conversation resumes with cautious laughter, and you sip your drink slowly, feeling the weight of the room settle once more into obedience. Outside the window, you glimpse the morning sun climbing higher over the city, glinting off rooftops and temple domes, and for a fleeting moment, you imagine sitting among the market stalls below, tasting food without ceremony, speaking to someone who is not afraid of every word you say. The thought vanishes as the vizier clears his throat again, asking if you approve new taxes. You nod absent-mindedly, sealing another decision you will not remember tomorrow. When breakfast finally ends, everyone bows so low their foreheads nearly kiss the floor, and the air fills with murmured blessings. You rise carefully, your stomach full yet unsatisfied, and think that for a god you spend an awful lot of time pretending to enjoy things you never asked for. You step out into the open air at last, trading the perfume of the palace for the raw scent of sand and stone, and the world beyond the walls hits you with a brightness that no amount of gold could ever match. For outside, the city moves with a rhythm that feels almost alive. You watch the workers in the distance, tiny figures against the endless horizon, carving your eternity out of limestone blocks under a sun that shows no mercy, their chants carried on the wind like the pulse of the empire. You are told they labor joyfully in your name, yet even from afar you can sense the fatigue etched into their movements, and it stirs something quiet inside you that the priests would rather you ignore. The overseer bows when you approach, his voice respectful but hoarse from shouting commands, and he explains that the foundation of your next monument is nearly complete. The structure will reach for the sky, he says proudly, a stairway for your soul to climb when your mortal body no longer serves. You nod, pretending to share his excitement, but your gaze lingers on the workers hauling massive stones up wooden ramps, their backs bent, their shadows trembling on the sand. Historians, centuries later, will debate how these wonders were built, ropes, levers, or divine intervention. But no scroll will ever capture the sound of sweat hitting the dust, or the smell of hot stone beneath bare feet. You take a few steps closer, and the workers freeze mid-motion, unsure whether to bow or continue. You wave your hand gently, signaling them to carry on, though the gesture itself feels hollow. They resume with renewed energy, as if your approval alone lightens the weight of the stones. A foreman points toward a chamber being carved beneath the structure. Your future resting place, he calls it, the place where your body will be preserved in eternal perfection. You smile politely, though the thought of watching your tomb being built while you are still breathing feels like reading the end of a story you have not finished writing. A gust of wind blows through, carrying sand across your sandals and into the folds of your robe, and you realize that for all your supposed divinity, even you cannot keep the desert out. The sun beats harder now, and you lift your hand to shield your eyes, marveling at how small the workers look against the pyramid's rising slope. Somewhere deep within the rhythm of hammering and chanting, you think you hear laughter, a strange light sound that does not belong to ceremony but to something real. You cannot tell if it comes from the laborers or from your own memory of simpler days, but it lingers long enough to make you sigh. The priest beside you mistakes it for reverence and quickly murmurs another blessing in your honor. You let him, because correcting him would ruin the moment, and besides, it is easier to let others right your holiness than to confess your humanity. As you turn back toward the palace, the sound of chisels follows you, steady, echoing, relentless. Each strike a quiet reminder that monuments may last forever, but the hands that build them do not. You return to the palace at midday, stepping from the blinding desert light into the cool hush of marble corridors that seem to swallow sound. And for a moment it feels like entering a different world, one where shadows whisper, and the air smells faintly of lotus and secrets. The palace, for all its grandeur, is a place where silence carries more meaning than speech. The moment you cross the threshold, courtiers materialize as if summoned by thought alone, scribes clutching papyrus scrolls, attendants with trays of fruit polished to perfection, and advisors already preparing to rehearse the day's praises. You walk past them with the calm of someone who has long since learned that too much attention is just another kind of noise. Behind you, their footsteps sink to yours like a cautious echo. At the heart of the palace lies a garden shaded by date palms and bordered by small pools that reflect the blue of the sky. And though it was built as your private refuge, even here there is always someone watching. A servant tending flowers, a guard pretending to admire the fish, an advisor conveniently passing through. You sit on a low stone bench beside the pool, its water rippling with reflected sunlight, and for a few heartbeats you let yourself breathe without ceremony. Somewhere in the background you hear your siblings laughing, the kind of laughter that sounds innocent until you notice it stops the moment you enter the courtyard. Family, in royal terms, means competition dressed as affection. Your eldest brother nods to you from across the garden, his smile polished to perfection, and you nod back, both of you knowing that your gestures are as rehearsed as the morning rituals. Every royal household throughout history tells this same story, loyalty tangled with ambition. And in Egypt, where the line of succession is sacred, the family dinner table often doubles as a chessboard. Historians still argue over which pharaoh's heirs plotted first, though you suspect they all did. Power has a way of making even laughter sound like strategy. A scribe approaches with a message written on fine linen instead of papyrus, a sign that its contents are not for public eyes. You take it carefully, noting how his hands tremble slightly, and when he bows, his forehead nearly touches the tiles. The letter bears the seal of your queen, officially your partner, unofficially your most unpredictable ally. She rules the inner chambers with more grace than the priests manage in the temples, and everyone knows her words can move courtiers faster than your own commands. You break the seal and read her note, a reminder that the merchants from Byblos await an audience, and a subtle line that reads, "Do not let the vizier speak for you again." The message is both affectionate and pointed, proof that even your domestic life has footnotes of diplomacy. You fold the linen slowly, pretending to study the fish gliding through the pool so that no one sees your smile. In truth, you admire her directness. In a palace filled with flattery, honesty feels like fresh air. You rise to return inside, and as you do, a servant discreetly hands you a small papyrus roll. Anonymous, unsealed, its ink still damp. It contains a single sentence. The builders say the tomb wall cracked overnight. You exhale through your nose, neither surprised nor alarmed, and hand it back to the servant with instructions to deliver it to the overseer. The message, like so many others, will be buried under ceremony before nightfall. As you walk through the hall lined with statues of your ancestors, you cannot shake the feeling that they are watching with quiet amusement, their stone eyes gleaming in the dim light. You imagine them whispering among themselves, another day, another crown pretending to hold the sky. You almost laugh, but stop yourself, because laughter here is treated like lightning, rare, sudden, and often misinterpreted. By the time you reach your chambers, the palace musicians have begun their afternoon practice, filling the corridors with slow, rhythmic harp notes that seem to echo the steady beat of the Nile itself. You pause at your doorway, hand resting on the golden handle, and glance back at the fading sunlight slanting through the columns. Every surface glitters, every corridor hums with life, and yet beneath it all runs a quiet undercurrent of unease, a truth no one speaks aloud. The palace, for all its splendor, is built less on stone and more on suspicion. Night slides softly over the palace like a silken shroud, the air warm and fragrant with incense that curls in pale ribbons through the corridors. And you, still dressed in ceremonial linen, sit before a polished bronze mirror that reflects not just your face, but the careful illusion of divinity you are required to wear. The attendants move quietly around you, applying scented oils, adjusting the layers of gold that weigh more than they appear, each piece designed not for comfort, but for reverence. You lift your hand and light flickers off the bracelets, scattering sunbursts onto the wall. This is what people imagine when they think of glory. Gleaming metal, perfect symmetry, the illusion that nothing ever falters. But perfection, as you know, comes with a price. Behind the elegance lies the exhaustion of never being allowed to breathe as yourself. You are not a person, but a performance, and every nod, every blink, every breath is part of the choreography that holds the kingdom together. Outside the window, the city glows with oil lamps. The common people sing, trade, gossip, live, unaware that the divine figure they worship spends nights wondering what freedom might feel like. You remember stories of earlier kings who built monuments so vast they broke the backs of thousands, all for the sake of perfection. And though history remembers their splendor, it forgets their sleeplessness. One of them, legend says, ordered his tomb walls repainted 7 times because the shade of blue was not celestial enough, and by the end he no longer knew whether he was chasing beauty or running from decay. Historians still debate which ruler it was. Some claim it was Ramses II, others whisper of Amenhotep, but no one agrees because even their records were edited for glory. You stare at your reflection, and wonder how much of your own life will be rewritten after you are gone. Behind you, the queen enters quietly, her bare feet making no sound on the marble. She does not bow or speak at first. She simply watches you watching yourself, and when she finally sits beside you, her voice is soft enough to blend with the crackling of the oil lamps. They will love the image, she says, even if they never knew the person. You smile because you know she is right. Together you sit in silence, two figures bathed in golden light, both aware that love in the palace is not always a feeling, but sometimes a strategy. Then she reaches for a small jar of powder, crushed malachite, the kind used to outline eyes for beauty and protection, and traces a line beneath yours. It is cool, smooth, deliberate. For the gods, she murmurs. You both know it is for the watchers instead, the priests, the servants, the generations to come. Beyond the chamber, the sound of a lyre floats in from the courtyard, soft and steady. The same melody played at every royal feast for centuries. It reminds you of the craftsmen who made that music possible, the ones who carved instruments, the ones who carried water through endless corridors. Their names will not be remembered, though their hands shaped every note of your world. You think of them when the musicians play, because somewhere inside you still recognize that perfection without gratitude is just vanity in disguise. The queen rises, adjusts her bracelets, and leaves without another word. You remain, staring at the flicker of lamplight across your reflection until the image begins to blur. Maybe the gods demand perfection, or maybe humans invented that excuse to justify their own hunger for control. Either way, you realize the mirror shows less of you and more of what others need you to be. A gust of desert wind slips through the window lattice, carrying with it a faint scent of myrrh and distant sand. You close your eyes, listening to the quiet rustle of the curtains, and for a moment, you imagine stepping outside the palace walls, barefoot and unseen, into the cool sand under the moonlight. No titles, no eyes, no golden burdens. But then, a gentle knock at the door breaks the thought, and an attendant enters to announce the high priest's arrival for the nightly ritual. You sigh, nod once, and stand, the sound of your jewelry filling the silence like 1,000 tiny bells. Perfection waits for no one, not even the perfect. The night stretches long and golden inside the great hall, where torches flicker against painted walls, showing your triumphs in perfect, flattering detail. And before you lies a table that looks less like dinner and more like an offering to excess itself, piled high with figs, honey cakes, roasted birds, and jugs of sweet wine. You sit at the center, as expected, the living embodiment of prosperity, while musicians play gentle tunes meant to lull the crowd into awe. The scent of spice and roasted grain fills the air, so thick you could almost taste the wealth that built it. Servants move like shadows between guests, pouring and bowing, and you watch as laughter ripples down the line of nobles, their smiles wide but their eyes flicking constantly toward you, measuring every reaction, every small movement of your hand. You lift your cup, and instantly the hall quiets as if even sound must wait for your permission to exist. You toast not to power, but to peace, because it sounds nobler, and because you have learned that people prefer their rulers poetic. Somewhere down the table, a court storyteller begins to recite verses about your victories, each line stretching the truth just a little further until even the walls seem to blush at the exaggeration. You have heard these stories 100 times, yet you listen anyway, partly because interruption would break the ritual, and partly because repetition is its own kind of comfort. The storyteller ends with a flourish, the nobles cheer and the priests nod approvingly, satisfied that the illusion of perfection remains intact. You glance toward the musicians, their fingers moving gracefully over strings and pipes, and you wonder if they ever tire of playing for faces that rarely smile for real. One of them meets your gaze for half a heartbeat before lowering his eyes, and in that small moment you recognize something. Exhaustion, maybe, or quiet solidarity, and you take another slow sip of wine. The taste is rich, almost too sweet, but it lingers pleasantly, much like the silence that follows when the last note fades. A young servant approaches to refill your cup, careful not to spill a drop, and you catch the faint tremor in his hands. You want to tell him to relax, that you are not as divine as everyone insists, but such honesty would ruin the performance. So you let him pour thank him softly and watch his relief flicker like candlelight. Around you, conversation resumes, but beneath the laughter and the hum of music lies a thread of tension, the kind that binds a world too perfect to admit imperfection. One of the nobles raises a platter of fruit carved into intricate shapes, and everyone marvels, yet all you see is the waste of time and labor hidden beneath the beauty. You wonder, briefly, if the gods ever look down at your feasts and find them excessive, or if they too are dazzled by the gold and forget the hunger that built it. A soft breeze enters from the balcony, carrying the scent of the river through the hall, and for a moment it feels like freedom. You let your gaze drift to the stars beyond the pillars, thinking how strange it is that a world so vast could fit within the fragile boundaries of one ruler's table. You raise your cup once more, not for the crowd this time, but quietly, to the invisible, to the forgotten, to the builders, the servants, the musicians, who make the illusion believable. No one notices, and that feels just right. Long after the feast has ended, and the hall stands empty, you wander through the palace alone, your footsteps echoing softly against the cool stone, as the night breeze drifts through half-open doors, carrying faint traces of incense and laughter that have already faded into memory. The torches burn lower now, their flames small and unsteady, and shadows stretch long across the painted walls where gods watch you from every direction, carved eyes gleaming faintly as if alive. You have seen these faces every day of your life, protectors, judges, and symbols of eternity. But tonight they feel different, heavier, as though they are waiting for you to remember something important. You move deeper into the hall of offerings, where priests have left trays of flowers and bread before golden idols, and the air smells of sweet decay, a mixture of perfume and wilted petals. Somewhere beneath the temple lies your tomb in progress, sealed for now, but you can almost sense its stillness, a hollow echo beneath your feet that hums like a heartbeat beneath the earth. They say the afterlife is perfect, that every soul who passes through the gate finds fields of endless harvest and skies that never fade, but you have begun to suspect that even eternity might grow heavy when it is built on fear. The priests speak often of judgment, of hearts weighed against feathers, of perfect balance. But you wonder who measures the hearts of the priests themselves. You pause before a statue of a falcon-headed god, its gaze piercing even in shadow, and for a moment you whisper, half prayer, half confession, that you do not feel ready to be a legend. The words sound strange in the quiet, too human, too fragile, so you let them dissolve into the air. Historians will one day argue about how much faith ancient rulers truly had. Some will claim you believed every ritual without question, others that it was all performance. The truth, of course, is softer and harder at once. Belief is easy when the world demands it from you. You touch the cool stone of the statue, tracing the grooves where countless hands have prayed before yours, and feel both comforted and unnerved by the thought that all those prayers once belonged to people just as uncertain as you. Somewhere behind you, the faint sound of sandals on stone breaks the silence. A priest approaching, carrying a small lamp that flickers against his solemn face. He bows low, murmuring a blessing for your continued favor, and asks if you wish to view the burial chamber's progress. You hesitate, but curiosity wins. Together you descend through a narrow passage lined with hieroglyphs that shimmer in the lamplight, the air growing cooler with each step until the scent of fresh-cut limestone replaces the warmth of the upper halls. The chamber is vast and unfinished, walls covered in sketches of scenes meant to guide your soul through the next world. Boats on golden rivers, gates guarded by watchful beings, endless fields under stars that never fade. You stand in the center and the silence feels alive, like breath caught between worlds. The priest begins to recite the sacred verses, his voice echoing softly, and though you know the words by heart, tonight they sound different, almost pleading. When he finishes, he asks if you wish to add anything to the design, and you almost laugh at the absurdity of customizing eternity, but instead, you tell him simply to leave a little space unpainted. For what might come after, you say. He nods, though his eyes flicker with confusion. When he departs, you remain for a while longer, listening to the stillness of the tomb that will one day hold you, and the thought that history will remember this moment without truly knowing it. makes you smile faintly. Then, as you turn to leave, your lamplight catches on a single grain of sand falling from the ceiling, glowing briefly before vanishing into the dust, proof that even stone remembers time. When morning comes, the light that spills into your chamber feels less like warmth and more like revelation. Too bright, too honest, cutting through the silk curtains as if the sun itself wishes to remind you that perfection never truly sleeps. You wake not to the sound of music or prayer, but to the faint whisper of wind against stone, gentle, unassuming, yet strangely insistent. It carries the scent of the river, cool and metallic, and the faint murmur of distant life beyond the palace gates. For a moment you simply lie still, staring at the painted ceiling where winged shapes glide across the plaster sky, frozen in eternal flight. They have been there since your coronation, symbols of power and freedom, though neither word feels entirely true anymore. Servants arrive with fresh linen and trays of fruit, bowing so low that you almost wish they would speak instead. But silence is the only loyalty you can trust in this place. You let them dress you in white and gold once again, the ritual motions of divinity repeating like the turning of seasons, and you realize that even gods can become bored of being worshipped. The priests gather for your morning blessing, reciting verses about order and eternity, and though their voices rise and fall in perfect rhythm, your mind drifts elsewhere, to the sound of chisels underground, to the laughter of workers who build your tomb to the way the stars looked when you were young and unburdened. You wonder how much of your own life belongs to you and how much to the image others have written on your behalf. There is a storm somewhere beyond the desert today. You can smell the electricity in the air, sharp and dry, and it makes your skin prickle. The guards report that the river has begun to rise earlier than expected, that the fields might flood before the next moon. You nod, pretending to ponder divine balance, though secretly you find comfort in knowing that nature still answers to no crown. Historians will one day write about these seasons as cycles of divine will, neatly measured and recorded, never mentioning the quiet anxiety that came with every unexpected flood or dry spell. You step out onto the balcony overlooking the city and watch the people below. Tiny figures moving through markets, leading animals, carrying baskets. Their lives seem so small, yet so beautifully unchoreographed, and for a fleeting second, you envy them. A young boy runs past with a clay toy spinning in his hands, and the sight makes you smile in a way that feels real, unpracticed. Then thunder rolls across the horizon, distant but certain, and the wind rises, pulling at your robe. You close your eyes and let it wash over you, savoring the rare feeling of being moved by something you cannot control. When you open them again, the city glows under a strange golden haze, the kind that appears before a storm breaks, when everything feels suspended between calm and chaos. The high priest steps onto the balcony, uneasy, and reminds you that the people will expect you to speak soon, to reassure them that even the weather follows your command. You nod, though inside you know the truth. The world has never belonged to kings or gods, only to time. You take one last look at the horizon where lightning flashes faintly above the dunes, then turn back toward the palace, your steps soft but certain. The storm will come, and when it does, no amount of gold or prayer will keep the wind from finding its way in. Still, you cannot help but smile, because somewhere deep within, the storm feels like freedom. The storm finally breaks, and it does not roar with fury as you imagined. It sighs almost tenderly, as rain begins to patter against the limestone terraces and slide down the carved faces of gods who have not wept in centuries. You stand by the balcony rail, watching drops trace lines across the gold and sandstone tiny rivers cutting through centuries of dust. And for a moment you think the city looks cleaner reborn, like the gods themselves decided to wash away a layer of illusion. Below, the streets glisten. People lift their faces to the sky, laughing and shouting as if the heavens themselves had given permission to be human again. You stay silent, letting the sound of rain fill your ears. It is steady, rhythmic, almost hypnotic, and you find it soothing that something so natural, so uncontrollable, can still humble a world built on ceremony. Behind you, attendants whisper, unsure whether to interrupt. And finally, one gathers courage to remind you that the storm could be seen as an omen, that perhaps the gods wish for a new offering. You smile faintly, because that is what people do. They give meaning to every raindrop, every breeze, every shadow, until mystery becomes manageable. You turn from the balcony and walk through the corridor, your sandals leaving faint wet marks on the polished floor, each one disappearing quickly as servants rush to dry them. The palace feels alive tonight. Its columns hum faintly in the wind, the torches hiss and the curtains breathe like living things. Somewhere deep inside the walls, water drips through a crack, each drop echoing like a slow heartbeat. You pass through the Hall of Silence, where murals depict your ancestors kneeling before eternal suns, their painted eyes wide and unblinking, and you cannot help but feel them watching. You pause before one, your great-grandfather, the builder of the second Great Pyramid, a man so obsessed with immortality that he ordered his image carved into every temple wall. He looks proud, stern, unyielding, but now the paint has cracked around his mouth, giving the faint illusion of a smile. You reach out and trace the line of his jaw, wondering whether he too had stood where you stand, questioning whether eternity is worth its price. Somewhere within you, a quiet thought surfaces, that maybe power is not a ladder, but a loop, and each ruler walks the same circle, believing they are the first to do so. The thunder rumbles again, low and distant, like an old god clearing its throat. You continue walking until you reach the inner courtyard, where pools overflow gently with rainwater, the reflections of palm trees rippling with every drop. The air smells of wet earth and myrrh, and the sound of frogs begins to rise from the garden beyond the wall, a small orchestra of life that no scribe will ever record. You take a seat on a stone bench beneath an open archway and listen. The storm begins to soften, its anger fading into something gentler, and for the first time in many nights you feel the strange comfort of being just another creature beneath the same sky as everyone else. The gold still gleams on your wrists, the crown still presses against your temples, but the illusion feels thinner now, almost transparent. You think about tomorrow, about the endless ceremonies that await, the advisors with their scrolls, the priests with their warnings, the artists with their flattery. It will all continue, as it always has, as it always will. Yet tonight, in this rare hush between thunder and dawn, you allow yourself to imagine another version of eternity, not carved in stone or sealed in a tomb, but whispered through rain, soft enough to be forgotten by history, yet real enough to be felt by the living. By dawn, the storm has passed, leaving the world draped in a kind of stillness that feels almost deliberate, as though time itself has decided to pause and let you breathe. The courtyard glistens in soft gold light, every droplet clinging to the leaves like jewels too fragile to last, and the air carries that quiet scent of renewal that follows every night of chaos. You rise slowly from the bench, your robe damp at the edges, and walk toward the reflecting pool at the center. The water is perfectly still now, a flawless mirror, and when you look down you almost do not recognize the face staring back. The eyes seem older, the lines around the mouth softer, the expression less certain but somehow more human. You reach out and touch the surface. Ripples distort the reflection into 1,000 shifting shapes, each one a different version of you. The ruler, the believer, the actor, the dreamer, the child who once ran barefoot along the riverbank. For a moment, they all seem to coexist, layered like the carvings on temple walls where time never erases, only adds. The first light of morning spills across the horizon, illuminating the distant pyramids, their edges sharp and glowing, and for the first time in years you feel no pride, only quiet awe. They are magnificent, yes, but they are also prisons of ambition, monuments built not for love of gods but for fear of being forgotten. You realize then that everything you have ever built, every hall, every statue, every ritual, was never for the divine. It was for memory. Humans crave permanence because they cannot accept that beauty was always meant to fade. You turn and begin walking through the corridors once more, passing sleeping guards and silent servants who will awaken soon to prepare for another day of worship and work. The palace hums softly, as if exhaling from the night's tension. When you reach the temple entrance, the high priest is already waiting, his robes spotless, his expression perfectly composed. He bows deeply, murmuring that the omens were favorable, that the storm has washed away impurity and the gods are pleased. You thank him gently, though inside you feel a quiet irony. How easily humans mistake natural grace for divine approval. The priest leads you toward the sanctuary where morning offerings await. Bread, figs, honey, small jars of oil gleaming in the torchlight. You kneel out of habit, whispering the prayers you have known since childhood. And though your voice is steady, your mind drifts elsewhere. To the people outside the palace, sweeping rainwater from their doorways, laughing, rebuilding, moving forward without ceremony. They too have their own rituals, smaller but truer, and for the first time, you envy their simplicity. When the prayers end, the priest begins reading from a sacred scroll describing the duties of a ruler, the balance between divine order and mortal compassion. And as his voice echoes softly through the chamber, you find yourself finishing his sentences silently, already knowing every word. These laws were written by men long gone, men who once thought the same thoughts, felt the same doubts, and built the same illusions. History is less a straight line and more a spiral, and each generation mistakes its turn for the first. The priest closes the scroll and bows again, asking if you would like to rest. You shake your head. Instead, you tell him you wish to walk to the river. His surprise is subtle, quickly hidden behind a polite nod. No one questions your wishes, though they all worry when you stray from routine. You step outside once more into the fresh daylight, the sound of birds rising from the reeds, their calls sharp and clear. The path to the river is long and lined with stone statues of gods, each one casting a long, solemn shadow. You walk slowly, trailing your fingers along the cool surfaces, feeling the grooves left by the sculptor's tools. Each figure looks eternal, but the faint cracks around their edges tell another story. Eternity, it seems, always has a deadline. When you reach the riverbank, the water gleams like molten glass, calm yet alive beneath the surface. Children splash at the edge, fishermen cast nets, women wash fabric in rhythmic motions, and all around you hums the unpretentious sound of living. No ceremony, no titles, no perfection, just life unfolding as it always has. You watch it all in silence, the rhythm of the scene somehow more sacred than any prayer you have ever heard. For a long time you stand there, letting the sound of water and laughter blend with the pulse of your own heart, and you realize that the gods do not need temples to be worshipped. They exist wherever people live without fear. As the morning unfolds into warmth, the scent of wet sand and papyrus fills the air, and you feel the sun rise higher behind your shoulders, slow and deliberate, as though it too is reluctant to move too quickly through such a still moment. You walk along the riverbank, feeling the cool mud press between your sandals, the reeds brushing gently against your hands. The people around you barely notice your presence. Perhaps they do not expect to see their ruler here, or perhaps they simply do not care. And somehow, that indifference feels freeing. You hear two old men arguing cheerfully over the size of their fish, one insisting the gods favor him because of his superior bait, the other laughing that perhaps it is his beard the gods admire more. The scene is so ordinary, so profoundly unimportant, and yet it feels more sacred than all the ceremonies you have ever performed. You think of how history will one day reduce these people to numbers and hieroglyphs, grain rations, labor records, census marks. But here, in this fleeting moment, they are alive in full color. The wrinkles at the corners of their eyes, the rhythm of their laughter, the smell of the firewood they carry home. You realize that history never really remembers individuals. It remembers echoes, and maybe that is enough. You wander farther, away from the noise of the city, until the river opens into wide marshland where ibis birds stalk gracefully through the shallows. The sound of their wings is soft, almost whisper-like, and you imagine for a moment that the gods might sound the same when they pass through the world. Barely there, just a shimmer, a shift in the air. You sit beneath a fig tree, its branches heavy with fruit, and you pluck one that has ripened perfectly. The sweetness on your tongue surprises you. It tastes of sun and soil and something you cannot name, something that feels real in a way divinity never did. You close your eyes, listening to the gentle lap of water, and your mind drifts to the future. What will become of you after this? Will your name survive the centuries carved into stone, or will it be swallowed by time as easily as the river swallows a fallen leaf? Historians still debate whether the tombs and monuments built by ancient kings were acts of devotion or desperate attempts to outlast oblivion. You suspect it was both. Humans do not just fear death, they fear being ordinary. You lie back in the grass, watching the clouds drift like fragments of linen across the sky. And for the first time, you feel no urge to control anything. You think of your people, your city, your palace, all the lives that move within those walls like veins of a living body. You think of the priest who still believes he can read the gods, the architects who chase perfection with every stone, the children who chase beetles in the dust. All of it continues, with or without you. The thought should unsettle you, but instead it feels like release. You smile faintly, realizing that power was always an illusion, a story told to make humans feel less small. The truth is simpler. Life goes on. The river flows. The sun rises. And maybe, just maybe, that is enough. The sound of distant bells drifts faintly across the water, calling people back to their duties. And you take one last look at the horizon, where the city shimmers in heat. Its towers and temples gleam, proud and defiant, as though daring time to erase them. But you know better. Even stone forgets. You rise slowly, brushing dust from your robes, and begin walking back toward the palace, your shadow long and bending with the uneven path. The journey feels different now, not a return to power, but a quiet farewell to the illusion of it. Each step is lighter than the last, as though the weight of centuries is lifting from your shoulders. By the time you reach the gates, the guards bow, unaware that the person before them is not quite the same as the one who left. You smile, nod politely, and step inside, the cool stones swallowing your footsteps. Somewhere deep inside, you know the story is ending. Not with triumph or tragedy, but with calm acceptance. The palace feels quieter now, its marble corridors stretching endlessly like the inside of a dream. You move through them slowly, the echo of your steps folding into the soft hum of distant life, servants whispering, sandals shuffling, a door closing somewhere in the far distance. The air smells faintly of incense and sun-warmed limestone, and you notice how the light filtering through the narrow windows seems softer than before, gentler, as though the building itself is finally exhaling. You reach the central hall, the one that once felt so immense and filled with ceremony, but now it feels almost fragile, as if a single breath could unsettle the dust resting on its golden statues. You walk among them, your ancestors carved in perfect symmetry, and you see in their eyes the same quiet fear you once carried, that they would be forgotten. You think about how each generation believed it could master time, how each believed its rule would last forever. But the truth is so beautifully human. Time belongs to no one. You pass the throne where you once sat, the sunlight glinting across its golden arms, and for the first time you see it not as a symbol of greatness, but as an artifact of longing. The gold is cool beneath your hand, smooth and heavy, but it does not hum with divine energy anymore. It is just metal. You linger for a while, running your fingers along its edge until the silence deepens into something nearly sacred. You step away, moving toward the balcony that overlooks the gardens. The wind rises gently, brushing against your face, carrying the scent of water lilies and damp soil. Below you, the gardeners move like shadows, tending to the plants that will outlive them all. You lean on the railing, feeling the stone warm beneath your palms, and you breathe. A long, slow, deliberate breath that fills your lungs completely before drifting away again. It feels good. It feels enough. You realize that maybe the pharaohs of old built their monuments not to challenge eternity, but to understand it, to make peace with the endless cycle of life and decay. The gods never needed pyramids. Humans did. You close your eyes and imagine the vast desert stretching beyond the city, its sands rippling endlessly beneath the sun, each grain carrying a memory too small to name. You picture the pyramids far away, their silhouettes sharp against the horizon, and you think of all the hands that built them, thousands of lives, thousands of breaths, each one forgotten, and yet somehow still present in every stone. You wonder what it would feel like to stand there at night, when the wind hums low and the stars pulse like slow heartbeats across the sky. Perhaps it would feel like being inside time itself, silent, vast, unhurried. You think of your own heartbeat, steady and quiet, and it begins to match that rhythm. Everything slows. The sounds of the palace fade until all that remains is the hush of the night air and the low murmur of the river in the distance. You let the thought of it carry you like a small boat drifting downstream. Now the story softens even more. The moon has risen above the desert, pale and wide, and it paints the palace in silver light. You move back inside, through the corridors that now feel almost fluid, their edges blurring as your eyes grow heavier. You can hear the faint rustle of curtains, the sigh of the wind against the stone walls, and it all sounds like a lullaby, written by the earth itself. You lie down on a couch near the open window, where the air is cool and carries the scent of jasmine. Your body relaxes easily, each breath longer than the one before it. You think about everything that has passed, the weight, the glory, the endless noise of ceremony, and then you let it go. You do not need it anymore. In its place, there is quiet. Deep, restful quiet. You feel your heartbeat slow to match the rhythm of the world outside, steady and calm. The light flickers gently on the ceiling, and the patterns it makes look like water flowing across ancient walls. Somewhere you imagine someone hundreds of years from now will stand here too, feeling the same breeze, seeing the same stars. The thought comforts you. The idea that life continues, always finding a way, even after names and empires fade into dust. You smile faintly, and your eyes grow heavy. The sound of the river drifts closer, as though it has entered the palace itself, winding through your dreams. You think of the ibis birds, the golden reeds, the endless sunlight, and you realize that you are part of all of it, never truly gone, just changing shape, the way sand becomes glass, and glass becomes light. And now, for the listener, wherever you are, whatever time it is, let your breathing slow with this story. Inhale softly through your nose, hold for a moment, then exhale through your mouth. Feel your body sink deeper into your bed, as though the sands of Egypt are wrapping gently around you, warm and safe. Let the air grow quiet in your room. Let your eyes grow heavy, and imagine that same river winding endlessly through time, carrying every memory it touches. You are not rushing anymore, you are simply floating, safe, calm, weightless. Each sound fades, every thought softens, until there is only stillness. Just the pulse of your own heart, echoing softly like distant drums beneath the desert stars. Everything is peaceful now, everything is enough. You have wandered through the age of pharaohs and returned with nothing to prove, only a quiet understanding that all stories, no matter how grand, end in rest. So breathe deeply, let the world slow down, and know that it is okay to let go. The night outside deepens until the world feels made of quiet silver and cool breath. You can almost hear the slow shifting of the desert dunes, like a giant creature turning in its sleep. The moon hovers above the horizon, soft and enormous, and its light spills through your window, painting a trail across the floor that looks almost like the path of the Nile itself. You follow it in your mind, winding through temples and tombs, through cities long vanished, through stories that no one remembers but that still hum somewhere beneath the sand. You realize that history is not about kings or wars. It is about moments like this, when everything slows down and you can feel the heartbeat of time itself. You are part of that rhythm now. The air grows warmer around you, wrapping you in invisible linen. You can almost smell the lotus flowers opening along the riverbank, their scent light and sweet, like the first promise of morning. Your breathing matches the rhythm of the water, soft and even, in and out, calm and steady. The stars above Egypt look exactly like the ones above you now, unchanged, eternal, silent witnesses to every dream and every ending. You imagine one falling, its trail of light brushing across the sky, and for a moment you make a quiet wish that the story never really ends, that it simply fades into another dream. The palace fades, the desert fades, the world grows soft at the edges, and all that remains is peace, the kind that asks for nothing and gives everything. So let your mind drift, gentle and weightless, into the calm where every sound becomes silence and every thought turns to light.